Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 178. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in Long Island, New York, we have a very, very special guest, Shaina Rowley. Shaina, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you. I've been excited for this. I think we should just address the elephant in the room, and that is our connection, our mutual connection is a longtime client and friend of mine and your current boyfriend, James Boria.
Yes. That is him.
James is one of the most unique individuals I think I've ever met. And for anyone listening who just wants to understand what I mean by that, you should just go back and listen to James's podcast episode where we talked about the bear crawl ultra marathon that he did through the streets of New York City. And you'll understand a little bit more. Did you know James back then?
No, never. I met him recently at my gym. So I always think back to that. I'm like, oh, I wish I was a part of that because it's so cool. But yeah, no, I didn't.
Yeah, well, it's cool that you think it's cool because I think a lot of people think it's crazy,
Yeah.
which it is, but I think cool is crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
But enough about James. Let's talk about you. So for people who don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself to the audience?
That's a good question, really. I feel like I do so many different things that I don't really put myself in I guess I would say entrepreneur. I do so many different things from fitness coaching and running a nonprofit organization that I'm a CEO, a part of. I do high rocks stuff now. I'm competing in that since I'm a little bit older now and I don't have basketball and softball to lean on anymore as much. Um, yeah, so pretty much entrepreneur. I do a bunch of things. I love working for myself. I don't like the idea of working for others. It just things, I don't know, doesn't give me a high in life. So yeah, really entrepreneur.
Well, let's dig in there first before we get into your bigger story. You and I are both entrepreneurs, so we both understand, as do a lot of people listening to this podcast, that there is so much upside to entrepreneurship. And there's also a lot of risk, and there's also potential downside, and there's a lot of stress. So tell me a little bit about that back and forth, the pros and the cons, the highs and the lows of entrepreneurship for you. How do you handle all of that?
So for me, I've been a waitress and a bartender most of my life, solely because I knew that I wanted to work for myself. And I was in school, I was going for nursing, which I wanted to do really badly, but then things happened in my life and that direction didn't go as well. And so I got a job that let me have freedom basically to be able to build something that I wanted to build, which I'm still doing today. But it comes with so much stress, so much anxiety. People think that something's just going to happen overnight. Don't get me wrong, it happens for some people. But if you don't put in that work or the time into it, it's never going to grow into what you want it to be. So for me, with my nonprofit, I think the scariest part for me was starting it. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I started Googling everything under the sun. How do you start a nonprofit? Who do I need to pay? What do I need to open? That put so much stress on me solely because I put it in my sister's name and I was like, I can't let anybody touch this. So then you just start becoming super protective over the things you want to build because you want it to be yours. And I think for a long time, I would say in the last 3, 4 years, I was like really stressed about how I wanted to grow my nonprofit, or really I wanted to do so many different things as an entrepreneur, like have my fitness thing and have nonprofit and then build my own brand. And it's just like so much to take on at one time because you think that it's going to happen overnight, but it doesn't. So I would say it could be super overwhelming for me at times, but having fitness for me is my outlet, regardless if I'm a coach or not. It's just brings me so much peace and so much happiness and helps me. Like after my workout, I'm like, okay, I'll like literally be working out thinking about things that I could do like in my business because you just become addicted to it. But other than that, I mean, I would tell anybody to go into entrepreneur. I know it's hard, but at the end of the day, like you say, no risk, no reward. So
Yeah. It's I think there are a couple common traits, if you will, that entrepreneurs have, or people who are drawn toward entrepreneurship. I think the threshold though is starting, like you had said, like the hardest part is getting started. And it's
mhm,
that you're standing at the precipice of this thing that you don't know what it's going to become. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what the next steps are, but there's something inside of you just begging you to start. And so you
yeah,
start and it's messy and you make mistakes and you fail and you fall down and it's slow and you take wrong turns. But through that process, you gain
learn.
clarity and
Yep.
exactly, and you learn and you grow and you adapt. And in that way, I think that entrepreneurship is just personal growth disguised as business.
I think a lot of people are also scared to fail. That's why they don't do it. But you literally have to fail in entrepreneurship to get anywhere.
Mhm.
Like I see those things on TikTok all the time, and it's like all the famous people on when they like have blown up in life. And it's like it's not, it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen now. Eventually, if you keep putting in the work, it's gonna happen. Um, so yeah, for me, it's definitely been stressful, but I know like at the end of it, it's gonna be worth it. I just like even when I was in nursing school, I was so unhappy because I'm like, I knew I wanted to do other stuff, but my family wanted me to do it so bad. So at that side of, I wanted to make everybody else happy, it put me in a place where I wasn't happy. So I was bartending and doing things that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make quick bread and do this stuff on the side because ideally it's what I want to do at the end of the day. And like, I think that's another thing of James that I love. Like, he's an entrepreneur and it pushes me to keep doing the things that I want to do. And like, he gets it. It's not easy to like find someone who actually gets that you want to do those kind of things. And it's okay that you're not working a 9 to 5, or you don't need to work a 9 to 5 to be successful or live a happy life. And I think a lot of people genuinely believe that in their soul. And that's why they're not as happy.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things. Most people are afraid of things that they don't understand. And I think to a lot of people, not having a full-time job or doing the normal traditional path is scary because it's unfamiliar. And so once you're in it, it becomes a little bit more familiar and maybe in some ways a little less scary. The other thing is, I think we have to choose what kind of stress and what kind of hard we're going to take on in life. And yes, entrepreneurship, building something, it is stressful, it's challenging, it's hard. And you know what else is hard? And I talk to people all day who feel this way, working a job that you hate, not knowing how to get out of it. That's hard. Or you know what else is hard? Doing something just because you want to please the other people in your life and deep down inside wishing that you weren't doing that thing. Those things are hard. And so you get to choose, right? And you and I have chosen one side of that equation, and plenty of people choose the other side of that equation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when I left bartending, I was like, I was so addicted to the money that like that was the addicting part of it, but I was so miserable every time, like I wouldn't mind going in, but then like hours would go by and I'd be like, what am I doing? Like this sucks. Even though I knew I was walking away with a good amount, a couple $100, it wasn't making me happy at all. So I'm definitely happy. I've been out of it probably like 6, 7 months now. So I'm like still transitioning to like not living that lifestyle. I was going to bed at like 2. Now I'm up every morning at freaking 6. So
Mhm.
that was hard for me to like transition into that time. But I just overall already feel so much better. Getting sleep, actually like having a routine and not living that nightlife that I don't want to be living at 30 years old. So
Mhm.
I'm happy I dipped out of that. So
Yeah. And so there's a lot behind what makes you the person that you are. And the format of this podcast involves a few deep questions. And I think that'll uncover some things. And so I'll just start us off with the first big one, and I'll let you take it where you'd like. And that question is, when you look back at your life so far to this point, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
Mm, my sister dying for sure. I think that really smacked me in the face. I was 23 years old, and she had just had a daughter. She was about a year and a half, who was my niece. And I was previously home like 5 days before that happened, and I was not expecting it at all. Like, I mean, my sister had problems like with addiction and this and that, but she passed away like literally when she was getting things together. She was gaining weight, she was getting engaged, like everything was finally moving forward. And that kind of just like put me in a lot of shock to like one experience that so young, to start being a part of her daughter's life at an age that I wasn't really prepared for. I was like YouTubing how to change diapers and like literally cutting corners to just do anything I could. Like, I think like today I'm going on year 7, and it's like I haven't really been able to grieve her the way that I wanted to grieve her over these years, because I feel like I woke up and I was like, where's Paisley? And that became the forefront of my brain, and everybody else around me, my family, my dad, my mom, my brother, her her dad. It has just been like that's been our focus. And sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, damn, I don't know how it's been 7 years and how all of this went by so fast. But I do wish that there there would be like more ways to learn how to cope with it. There's a lot of people I think who have lost siblings that don't talk about it, and that's something I actually been. I wanted to start something like a siblings corner meeting where it's like people come on a podcast, or not even a podcast, like a Zoom, and like everybody who's lost a sibling, like everybody's there. You don't have to talk, you can share your story, whatever. Just kind of build that community of people who have gone through something like this, because there's not that many people I know really that I can talk to about it that can go on that level of confusion with losing a sibling. I feel like we all know that like our parents are going to die at some point. We all prepare ourselves for that. I think about my parents dying all the time, and you don't really prepare yourself to lose a sibling. Like I didn't grow up thinking, oh, my sister's going to die at this point. Like I always think about my dad or my mom passing away. Always have growing up. I just never really thought of like losing a sibling. You think you're going to be with them forever, have Thanksgiving with them, Christmas, and pass those traditions on. I think that was definitely hands down the hardest thing for me to face, and still
So
to this day.
yeah, if we rewind 7 years back, that puts you at how old at that point?
23.
23. And how old was your sister?
24. We were 15 months apart.
And
Yeah,
were you guys close?
very close. Yeah.
And so if you can, and if you're able to take us back to when you found out, I asked this question because I think there are people who have also lost, maybe, maybe a sibling, maybe a parent, maybe someone else close to them, and or will, because that is the way life works, right? And so if somebody else is going to go through that or has gone through that, I think being able to hear from the very beginning how you've processed or how you've attempted to process would be helpful. And so going back 7 years, you're 23, she's 24, you lose her right away. What does that feel like? What is that like?
I was living in Myrtle Beach at the time, and I was going to school for nursing. I was about a semester in. I actually loved it. I was so excited for it because I've tried so hard to get into it for a long time. And she had just got engaged on St. Patrick's Day. And I'm like, this is great. Everything's getting better, blah, blah, blah. And about 5 days later, like I was talking about previously, I had to go home for something. And I'm like about to get on the flight, and she starts texting me essays. And I'm like, okay, something's going on. Like, what could be going on? She starts sending me all these essays about like an argument she got in with my mom. My mom's basically saying to her, you're using it again. She's arguing, saying, no, she's not. I'm about to get on the flight. I'm like, oh, I'll deal with this when I get home. I'll see you at dinner tonight. We had a dinner planned. She's like, I'm not going if she's going. I'm like, oh, here we go. Just typical family stuff. So I get there. We end up all going out, having a great time. The end of the dinner, my mom, in front of all my friends, literally says at the dinner table, your sister's using again. And I was like, what? And obviously, first off, horrible place to say that. I think my mom was just probably just holding that in for so long and like wanted it to come to my attention, or really anybody's. My sister's fiance was there at the time too, so my mom kind of just blurted that out. So my sister gets all mad. We end up leaving. We go back to her fiance's house, and she's acting weird. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna leave. So I ended up leaving, and I like vividly remember to this day that I was like walking out the door, and I thought to myself, I should hug her goodbye. And I don't know why I didn't, but I thought to myself at that moment was like, I'll see her tomorrow. And so that next morning, her and her fiance like pulled into my aunt's house, and it was like 5 in the morning. I was pulling out of it. We rolled down the windows, we exchanged words, and then I go and handle whatever I have to go to, and then I go back to Myrtle Beach. 5 days later, my dad, I guess my phone was on do not disturb, and I'm like, I had like 100 missed calls from my dad. I'm like, oh no, this can't be good. So that was like 7:30 in the morning. So I call my dad back, and he's like, the first thing he says is, "This is gonna suck." And I
Mm.
said, "What? Did Aunt Kathy die?" Because my Aunt Kathy has cancer right now. So my Aunt Kathy's been battling cancer since all this has gone on. She still is now. So that was my first thought. I was like, "What? What? Did she die?" And he said, "Your sister overdosed." And I said, "What?" And then I said, "Is she alive?" And he said, "No." And I
Mm.
just remember the silence like on the phone. And then I started like screaming on the top of my lungs because I was so confused. And then my dad's like, I gotta go, because he couldn't listen to me. I couldn't like vice versa. We couldn't really listen to each other or like cry. So then I just remember like dropping to my knees and thinking to myself, this can't be real, because I was
Mm.
just there and everything was going great. So then one of my friends like found out back home in Connecticut, and they had booked me a flight without even like telling me, and sent me the flight
Mm.
information. So I get on the flight. First thing I'm thinking about when I'm looking out the window is like, where is my niece? Like when all of this went down, I just got on a flight. I didn't even talk to anybody. And that's all I could think about from that moment on was like, what's going to happen to this kid now? Like I was so worried. And then we all became so worried. But then I would never cry in front of my parents. I would never cry in front of her. I dealt with it on my own time. And I
Mm.
think that's put a lot of stress and anxiety into my life, and a lot of pressure on me to like try to be the strongest person in my family, because usually I'm the glue of the family. So I don't know, it definitely just it still to this day like takes such a toll on me, because I haven't gone to therapy for it, or like done things that everybody wants me to do to cope with it. I deal with it by, being a part of her daughter's life. And I started the nonprofit that benefits children that lost a parent to an overdose, because it gave me a why. It gave me a reason to get up out of bed in the morning. It gave me a reason to be a better role model for Paisley and be the best aunt slash mother I could for her.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Um, I can't imagine what it feels like to move on, or to attempt to move on and live your life after a loss like that. I have a quote from Sarah Dessen, who said that grief can be a burden, but also an anchor. You get used to the weight, how it holds you in place. And part of me can't help but think of the relationship that you have with your niece. It sounds like she, in a way, has been an anchor in your life over the past 7 years. Tell me more about that.
So when she was a year and a half and my sister passed away, I was living in Myrtle Beach, and I was like, I dropped out of nursing school. I was like, I'm going home. So at that point in time, I was dating someone here for like, I was with the kid like 8 years. So he's like, I'm gonna go home. I'm like, all right. So we come. It was like, this is perfect. I don't have to move to Connecticut, but I'm 2 hours away. I can get on the ferry. So I moved, and every single weekend I went to Connecticut. I drove there, or I got on the boat. And I just, from that moment on, did everything I could to be like on the forefront of her life, because, I know that's what my sister would have done for me. I knew I wanted to be a part of her life. I could have woken up and said, I don't need this. And I chose a totally different direction, because I knew, one, that's what I wanted. It's what my sister would do for me. And three, it's in the best interest of Paisley. And she is the funniest, most hilarious, like, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me because I look at her and I see my sister. She laughs, I hear my sister. She does these faces and I'm like, oh my God, it's my sister. And it's such a blessing to me because I think so many people who have gone through what I've gone through in the addictions like sense, they don't have a child after to keep going. Like there's a lot of people who don't get that. And I'm just super, super grateful outside of all the stuff I face with it that I have her because she literally is 100% saved my life. I think about if I didn't have her, like where I would be mentally and emotionally. And I truly don't know.
Mm. For the people listening to this who are also grieving, how do you get through the really hard days?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, One is definitely the fitness aspect. I try to get in there to clear my mind as much as I can, but also leaning on my people. I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid to do because they don't want to be a burden to them. I literally have no filter. I will say whatever's on my mind, whatever on my brain. And if I like can trust you and I know I can trust you, I'm a very closed off person. So like if I meet you and I feel bad vibe, then I know it's a bad vibe. With James, like I know I could tell him anything and feel comfortable with it because I know he's not gonna judge me. He's gonna find ways to help me get through it. And there's a lot of other like my mom and my dad. My dad, I could tell anything to, but he wouldn't be able to like push me through it. I can't really, like he's going through technically the same thing I am, but in a different sense, lost his daughter.
Mm,
So I don't journal. I don't do therapy. That's a lot of things a lot of people do when they grieve. And it's something I've always wanted to get into.
mm,
But my issue is that is I start and I stop doing it because it's almost traumatic to me in a way. Like I've been to therapy once or twice, and in my mind, reliving it sometimes like it doesn't help me. And I know other
mm,
people are like, well, keep going, keep being consistent with it. It's gonna help you. I don't believe that it is gonna make me feel better because I have to relive it. Then if I don't
mm,
like you as a therapist, I got to go find another and relive it again. And I'm
mm,
all set with that. So I try to just like
mm,
find things that I love and hobbies. Like I could go outside and play basketball for 3 hours. If I'm having a bad day and I step foot on a court, nothing matters to me. I will block out the entire world because it's something I love and
mm,
it's something that keeps me going. So, like
mm.
I said, like creating that nonprofit, it just keeps me going in a sense. And I think people who are grieving, there's no like real book on how to grieve or how long you should be grieving because I don't believe in that. I think you can grieve. I'll grieve until the day I die, and no one can tell me I can't. And you just have to find things that you love and things that will keep you going during the hardest times of your life.
Yeah, there's this quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who said, "The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to."
That's
And
crazy you say that.
yeah,
Someone like people ask me all the time, like, how do you deal with it? And I literally say, you have no choice. Like at a certain point in time, like you have no choice and you learn to deal with it. Doesn't mean it gets easier, doesn't mean it gets harder. You just don't have a choice because they're not coming back. So you have to find a way to deal with it.
yeah. In what ways, and I know this question is such a weird one on the surface, and in no way, shape, or form am I insinuating that this is a good thing that this has happened, but since it has happened, in what ways are you better for it?
Oh, okay. So I would say that's a hard question because there's a lot of times I catch myself and I'm like, I'm not thankful my sister died, but I'm so thankful, blah, 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 happened like this. I catch myself saying that all the time. I would say, the nonprofit doing my toy drive and seeing those kids' reactions has brought so much happiness into my life. Though it hurts so much to see them go through those things that my niece is going through, that little bit of help during the holiday season helps other families that, yet again, are going through the same thing I'm going through, or just knowing that I'm giving back. I'm not the only person in the world facing this, and being able to connect with like-minded people who are going through that and to be able to grow my nonprofit or give back in a sense, really it keeps me going. But I would think it's overall made me it made me become a woman so much faster. It made me become stronger. It made me become a better athlete, a better aunt, a better daughter. And I'm definitely grateful for that because it made me grow up a lot faster than I expected myself to grow up.
Mm. I'm not sure why it took me this far into our conversation to realize this, but the first guest I had on this podcast, episode 2, uh, one of a very close friend of mine, Sam Tooley, he
Garage gym?
ha- yes, yeah. So Sam, I'm gonna plug this, Shayna. This is real life and for the podcast for people listening. I really want you at the Project Endure event this year. And part of why that is because people like Sam are there. Sam's story is one of the most powerful stories that I know of. And there's a reason why he was the first guest on the podcast. Long story short, had a lot of challenges in his life, lost his dad very suddenly, lost his younger brother, his only brother, and dog in a house fire less than a year after that. And like I get emotional thinking about it because of how much I care for him and just thinking of our podcast, we both shed some tears, but just the devastation is just like I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, and I can't even begin to imagine what it feels like. But he has chosen a why. You know, he put things into motion. He started a nonprofit for his brother. He built a business. He's an entrepreneur, right? There are so many commonalities of like
Mm.
grieving in motion, if you will, and not sitting and letting things be stagnant and letting things suffocate you, but continuing to move and continuing to use what has happened as a purpose to help others. It's so powerful, and there are so many similarities that I just wanted to throw that out there. So that could be a good episode to listen to. And if you're able to make the event this year, I'd love to introduce you guys.
Listen, I might be able to do that for you because we went to go book those tickets today and it's sold out. So
Yes.
it might be up in the air. We'll have, you said April, right?
Yep. For anybody listening, April 26th, 2025, here in Philadelphia, we're holding our annual event. It is the best day of the year because there's just a big room full of the best humans you can imagine doing hard things, being open, and building connections. And it's really special. So, yeah. Uh, but with that being said, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. So that was the hardest thing you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose. On the flip side, what's the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose and why did you choose to do that thing? It very well could be the entrepreneurship side of things, or it might be something else, but I'll let you think about it for a sec.
I'm honestly gonna have to say the 4x4x48 David Goggins challenge. I
Yeah.
completed 55 miles in 48 hours 2 years ago. I raised money for my nonprofit. Uh, when I got on that like third to last leg, I just remember everybody, like I had a team of five. I just remember everybody leaving my house. I had like everybody sleep over for all the legs, all the food was on the table. I just remember everybody leaving and me sobbing, telling myself I genuinely couldn't go another minute. And it wasn't the running, it wasn't the nutrition, it was the lack of sleep. I become very cranky when I don't sleep. Most girls do. And I just was like thinking to myself, why did I do this? But I knew why I did it. And my sister's birthday was on the 5th.
Mm,
So because I did my nonprofit, I made myself run 4.5 miles every 4 hours to total up to 55.
mm.
And all of us had an injury after. I don't regret it. I'm actually doing it this year with James in March. So we're gonna build a little team and get that going again. But that was like I look at the marathon, the New York City Marathon. I've done it 3 years in a row without even training for it, which was really hard. Don't get me wrong, but mentally, emotionally, and physically, the 4x4 just can break you down if you're not like going into that prepared. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think it's easy, but it's really not. It's just, it's not.
It's odd because it almost feels manageable because it's only, and I'll say only in air quotes, it's only 4 miles at a time. In your case, a little bit more, but yeah, it's sleep deprivation. It's the cumulative effect of that. And if David Goggins created it, you have to imagine it's hard. And so I think there's so much value in pushing our bodies, pushing our limits, and learning about ourselves in that way. Because, like you said, there was a moment or maybe multiple moments where you felt, I can't put my foot in front of the other. There's no way I can even take another step. And then somehow, some way you did. And in a way, this is what I love doing. That sounds really similar to the grieving process, right? Like, I'm sure there are days where you feel that way, and yet you get out of bed and you put one foot in front of the other in that sense and continue moving. Is that
Mm-hmm.
accurate?
100%. There's definitely times that I can get like super depressed out of nowhere. I'll say, for instance, like this was like Sunday. I swear to God, I slept till like 3:30. And James was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, I don't even know. Like I don't know. I don't even know. I just kept saying I don't know. I feel just low energy. And like that genuinely happens to me here and there. Like not every weekend, but like out of nowhere, I will just get hit with like a brick of life and I'm just out for the whole day, which I
Yeah.
guess is a way I could handle my grief sometimes is sleeping because it just helps me. I'm like, I gotta just sleep. I'll know when I had to sleep.
Mhm.
So the other day, I'm like, I got to take this opportunity and just knock out for like the whole day. And then for
Yeah.
him, he's all anxious because he wanted to go and do things. And I'm like, I just need to knock out. And I don't know.
Well, I think that's important to dig into just a little bit. It also reminds me of episode 158 with my friend Kate Moser. And Kate talked a lot about grief. The title of her podcast is It's a Gift. And we talked about how grief, in a way, is also a gift. But the thing I want to highlight is that she spoke about grief being this weird thing that comes in waves where you can have days or weeks or months of being more or less okay and living your life and things are good, and then you could go into a grocery store and see that box of cereal that that person really loved, and all of a sudden, like a switch flipped, it's just like tears. um
100%.
and I think that's important to dig into because, yes, there are people listening to this who are grieving, and there are people listening to this who know people who are grieving.
Hmm.
And I think there's a level of patience and grace and understanding and empathy that we can all do a better job of having around those who are grieving, because it is such an unpredictable, hard to control process.
Yeah. So going based off what you just said, I actually have on my Instagram a picture of me and my niece. And I put it, my sister passed away on Easter weekend. Obviously, Easter falls on different times or whatever, but it was Easter at that point. And I put up a post that was 4 years, and it says 4 years without my sister, and I've come to understand that grief doesn't just show up on the day that you die. It shows up when their favorite song comes on the radio or in aisle 5 of the grocery store, when you dial their number and you never know, you know that they're never going to answer again, or even on a random Monday night when you can't sleep. So based off what you just said, that reminded me of that post because it's true. Like you could be having such a good day, and then like I say, you go down this and you're like, oh, this reminded me of her, this reminded me of that. So I agree.
Mm. Man, so there's one more quote I'll read here and then I'll ask you a different question. But this quote is also from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who said, "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen." And I bring that up because I think loss, grief, all the hard things in life, they can make us more beautiful as people because we understand more and more that life is hard and it's ugly and it's unpredictable, and we should be more gentle and patient and kind to others. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like that has been part of your growth and part of your story over the past 7 years. So we've talked about how grief can last a lifetime. This is the Project Endure podcast. So I ask every guest, when you think of the word endurance or endure, what does that word or concept mean to you?
So for me, with everything I've been through, I would say that it embodies the idea of grit and
Mm,
the unshakable determination to just keep moving forward, literally no matter what is getting thrown your way.
mm. Unshakable determination to keep moving forward. I
Hmm.
love that.
Sweet.
Uh,
Yeah.
do you tap into a lot of the harder, darker things that you've gone through in life when you are physically pushing limits and you get into a tough spot? Where does your mind go?
So, you know that song, Hey Brother? This
Yeah.
is funny, but like sometimes when that comes on, I literally envision myself like running towards my siblings
Hmm.
and it just like pumps me up. Like I'll think of all of the stuff I've been through when I'm at the marathon, I'm at mile 25, and I really don't think I can make it to the end, but I know I can. Or I'll put on a song that reminds me of them and like it just pushes me to go forward 100%. A
Hmm.
lot of people can't tap into that dark space, but it's literally what keeps me going. And I think that's also what's made me such a good athlete nowadays is I'm definitely one of I'm the best athlete I've ever been than in college and even when I was younger. Like I never lifted. And now that I do the things that I do now, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I do this in high school and college? But I'm so grateful I didn't because I appreciate it more now. And like I said, it just all of that has just made me grow up and become such a strong person now.
Hmm. That song, I have not listened to that song in a long time, and after this episode, I'm going to go back and listen to it because I've never thought of it in that way. But for obvious reasons, it makes sense that you do. So that's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, one other thing I'll circle back to before we hit our final question is so you mentioned earlier that you've attempted to go to therapy, and I honestly just think that from a practical standpoint, therapy can be really hard when it's start stop, try to find the right person, relive that experience over and over and over again just to find the right person is or must be really frustrating.
Mhm.
Um and there's this concept that I've shared on the podcast before that I would love to hear your take on. And it is okay if you disagree with it. I would welcome that actually, if that's the case. So the concept is the buffalo and the cow and how those two animals handle storms. So Colorado is one of the only places in the world where cows and buffalo live close to each other. And because of the geography, or I guess the topography, it's very flat, but there are the Rocky Mountains that run through Colorado. And because of that, storms form over the Rocky Mountains and then roll over the plains. And for some reason, when the storm rolls over the plain, the cows see it coming. They turn away from the storm and they run away from the storm. But because they're running away, the storm catches up to them because they're moving in the same direction and they're in it for a longer period of time. For whatever reason, when the buffalo see the storm coming, they turn and they face the storm and they run directly into it. And because they run directly into it, it actually passes much quicker. And so the idea is called the paradox principle of sacrifice, where the sooner you face the hard thing head on, the quicker you get to the other side. I'd be curious if you feel like that applies to the therapy or the reliving it or any of that stuff, or if it's different. And it's okay if it's different.
Uh, I agree in the sense of like you can't run away from shit in life. You really do have to turn around, like you say, and go towards it full speed. And that's what being an entrepreneur, whether it's starting a business or grieving a loss, you can't just sit around and do nothing about it. You know, the pain, like I said, isn't going to go away. It's going to be stagnant, but you have to find ways to get through it. And I don't know. I just have so many thoughts on therapy, but then like deep down, it's like I do want to do it, but then I also put that into my brain that it's not going to work, and I think that's the reason why I don't do it, or I don't want to sacrifice the time to get better because in my mental space, I think that I'm doing just fine when even though deep down I know I'm not. So I think that comes with a little bit of stubbornness from me running away from it, but I do agree that if I probably applied time and found the right person and was able to, open up about really anything in that sense of the loss, I think yes, that it could help me in many, many, many ways. I just, I think I just get shied away from it and I run away from it because I tell myself that it's bad, it's bad, it's bad when it's not. There's probably a lot of benefits to it. It's just, I think I just have to, it's a little leap that I really have been struggling with and maybe when I do it and I do find the right person, it will end up being what I need it to be, like facing it head on. So I don't know. That's a resolution for mine to try to figure that out this year. So maybe I'll get back to you on that answer when I get in the trial and errors of it again.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other, but I think it's really awesome that you're able to share about your sister and about the loss and about the grief. And I agree that I think the right person, the right time, the right place, it probably ends up being really helpful. And what you did on this in this podcast and conversation to me is really brave and courageous. And so I appreciate you sharing everything that we talked about. And I know it's going to help a lot of people. With that being said, the last question of this podcast is my favorite because it's so direct and it's so tangible for the people listening. But if someone out there is struggling and they might have just lost someone close to them, they might be dealing with something else, but they're just going through a hard season and maybe it's dark and they just don't know what to do or where to go. And you got to speak to them right now and say whatever you wanted to say. What would you share with that person or those people?
There's so many things I feel I could say. I would definitely say it does get better. It really
Mm.
does. While there's a lot of people who say it doesn't, it's hard. Oh my God, you're never going to get through it. You do learn to get through it one day at a time, one foot in front of the other, but you have to make that choice to get up and want to be better and want to push to be better. And like I said previously, leaning on your people, that's a huge thing for me. That's probably the number one thing I would say is lean on your people. Don't be afraid to do it because what if the same thing happened to them? They would want to lean on you too. And like I said before, like, people think they're a burden, but you don't know leaning on that person, what it could do for you in that situation. So lean on your people.
I love that. And just to drive that home, it's something that's come up on other episodes of the podcast, but I think it's just so powerful that I'll share it right now again. You never know what other people are going through beneath the surface or behind the scenes. And, you know, you might be struggling. I'll use you as an example with grief on a certain day. And you might think to yourself, I don't want to confide in that coworker or share it with that person because I don't want to be a burden or they know nothing about this. When the truth is, you guys could have been working together, living together, existing in parallel, and they might be thinking and going through the exact same thing, but neither of you want to open up about it. And so you never know. And I
Mhm.
think the point is that when one person can be vulnerable or ask for help or lean on someone or be open, it also encourages other people to do the same. And because you never know what other people are going through, I just think we would all be shocked if we were a bit more open and vulnerable and willing to ask for help, what we would learn about other people and maybe not feel so alone in what we're going through.
I agree. I think also in the addiction aspect, people are ashamed to share their story, or they're ashamed that their son and their daughters, or who cares that they did the things that they did, regardless if they were an addict or not. That's a huge reason why I want to start a podcast. I told James, and I want it to be called Speak Up,
Mm.
because there's so many people that don't speak up and they don't share their story and they're not vocal with whether it's addiction or anything they go through. So that's something, another, like you say, another entrepreneur thing that just comes up in your brain when you're doing 1,800 entrepreneurial things.
Speak up. I love that. And I think that'll be the title of this episode. And so,
Woo!
yeah, right at the end there,
Perfect.
you snuck it in. That was great.
Perfect.
So, with that being said, Shayna, I appreciate you and everything that you're doing so much. And I know that people listening feel the same. If anyone wanted to reach out, learn more about your nonprofit, or just connect in any way, where's the best place for people to do that?
The best place would be on my Instagram, Shaina May Rowley, or the Bree Rally Foundation. It's not the Bree Rally Foundation. It'll be linked into my Instagram, but it's Bree Rally Foundation, Rowley.
Awesome. I will link your Instagram below and make sure people know where to go. And hopefully, we'll connect in April. And as always, thank you for being you. And until next time.
Thank you, Joe.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.